Angular Orange here with another tutorial. This tutorial is on reactive forms, and what we're going to do is we're going to do a simple application. We have an index.html, we have a root application component, and in that root application component we're going to have a template, associated template, and that template will have a phone form field. And what we're going to do is we're going to validate that field by creating a phone validator function. And when you type into the field, it's going to be a very simple validator. When you put in more characters than that's required, you'll see that the phone is invalid. So we'll take a look at this, and notice I color my component sky blue or maybe Dodger blue, whatever. So we see what our root component looks like. Our index.html has a different color, a light sky blue. So you could see the component embedded within the index.html. So what I'm saying is we're building a single page application, and you could see the Angular functionality inside of the Angular app. So all the user interactions inside of this area here are handled by the Angular framework. So basically, with this tutorial, what we're going to do is we're going to create a project called Form Reactive Validator, and we're going to have a app component which will color with a blue background. It will create a template form on the component that has a phone input field, and then we'll also create a phone validator. We're going to create a function that will validate whether the phone number is valid. If the phone is not valid, we'll display an error on the template to the right of the input field. And I showed you the snapshot already. So basically, just want to point out with reactive forms, you basically create the object, a TypeScript object, and then you create the template and map the template attributes, fields to the backing TypeScript object using directives. So that's basically what we do. So let's take a look at the application code. So let me go into presentation mode. Okay, so what we have here, and let me go through it again. You have an index.html with a style sheet. We have a main.ts driver. So keep in mind that you always have to go here to see what your driver file is, and I could have multiple drivers in my project. So that's why I keep going to this file first, just to keep you informed. And so we look at the index.html. We have an app root tag. We call our project Forms Reactive Validator. And let's take a look at the style sheet. The style sheet has a background color. It was turquoise. And we have the div tag is deep sky blue, and we have some other stuff here which we might not use. And then we have a main driver, and the main driver imports certain things from Angular core, imports the enable prod mode that will run the application in production mode and disable certain things like assertions. But right now we're running in development mode, so we'd still see whatever we need to see in development mode. We import a platform browser dynamic object from the platform browser dynamic package. We use that the bootstrap or app module. Our app module is our custom application code that we're writing, that this particular driver is bootstrapping for us. I have that app module in an app module directory. And so what we do is now we go look at the app module. So this is the app module. The app module imports browser module, ng module, forms module, and reactive forms module, and it imports an app component. Now, our app component is getting bootstrapped down here in the bootstrap attribute. So that is our root component. We're declaring our root component. And notice I'm using the ng module annotation here to define everything I need for my module. But the app module is a class and it bootstraps the root component. So the important thing to realize here is we are going to be writing a form, and we're going to be using reactive forms. So I import both a forms module and reactive forms module. The forms module helps you implement template-driven forms. The reactive forms module helps you implement reactive forms. So so basically, I import them, and I forgot what WebStorm does when it first creates the module. I believe it includes the forms module. But I'm not sure if it includes the reactive forms module, but we can go through an example and see. Okay, so let's take a look at the app component. Okay, so our app component imports the component because I use an annotation. There's an external template and a style sheet in the directory, and it uses the selector app-root. We saw that in the index.html. So far so good. Then we export a class called app component, and in that app component we have a form, which is a type form group. Now this is what we're doing. We're creating what we call form model. We're calling it a form. It is of type form group. So when you use reactive forms, you use these classes like form group and form control, and you get them out of the forms package, and a form group is a form. A form control is, let's say, a field. Okay, so in this particular form, we have a form control, which is called my-phone, and we instantiate the form control with a phone validator. Now, I'm sorry for the big pause. Had something in my mind, but the point you have to realize here is you need a form model, and notice we're looking at the TypeScript class. We're looking at the creating the model first. In reactive forms, you create the model first, and it's kind of like the opposite from template-driven forms. Template-driven forms, you create the template first. So here we're creating the model first, and once we have the model, although this is the simplest model you could think of, we have a simple control. The bottom line is now we have to go and create the template and use directives to map a form field to this model form control. Okay, so we go to the template. Let's just point out one more thing before we do that. I also have a phone validator here that I imported, and that's the phone validator I'm using for my form control. So the other thing different about reactive forms is that your validators are functions, and you customize them, you write them custom code, and you use them this way. With template-driven forms, it's different. You use directives. You have to create a directive to create a validator, and there's a lot of built-in validators in template-driven forms. So just want to point that out. So we do have a validator function here, and we've used that in our form control to validate our form control, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. let me see. Okay, so let's go back. Let's go to the template now. Okay, so the template has a div ID wrapper. I'm just styling this div tag, and then I have a form. Now this is a tag. Angular will map any form element to the to a form group, and basically with this particular syntax, what I'm doing is saying, using directors, I'm saying that the form group of this form, using this notation here with the square bracket, the form group of this particular form in my template is named form. And sometimes, and I think this is good practice, for clarity, call it form model, don't call it form. But I called it form here. I do things different ways just to mix it up a little bit. Okay, and now here I have a phone, and an input field is of type text. And this form control name with the reactive forms enables me to say this input field is being mapped to the backing object attribute name my-phone. So think of form control names as, in your template, you're pointing to the backing object, which could be a nested type of form. I'm going to say a nested, pictorially a JSON object, and you're pointing to an attribute inside that backing bean. Okay, so the bottom line is the form control points to my-phone, and therefore this input field is associated with that attribute. And basically, so let's go back to the object. And so basically, this name I gave it in my form group, all I need to do is use the form control name to point to that name. And the input field on the form and the form control within the form group are bound together. Now, let's take a look at the phone validator. The phone validator looks like this. Okay, I use a form control. The validators are functions in reactive form. So I export this function, I call it phone validator, and it takes a form control attribute. And in that form control attribute, what I do is I get a handle on the value. Now, the validator is returning a key, which is a string pointing to any object. Let's say an object of type any. And this is confusing to me. It still is, but the bottom line is, get used to it. We use it a lot in TypeScript. So the key is a string, and its its values is of type any. So you use this syntax when you point to a JSON response. Okay, so here in the implementation, I say the control value, if it's not defined, make it empty. But the control value is this constant value within my function. And it's valid if the value matches these characters or these characters. Okay, now here's the tricky part. And so I'm not going to get hung up on what this means. It could be a digits, could be a hyphen, whatever. And the important thing here is this function has to return whether the value is valid or not. And if it is valid, it returns null. If it's not, it returns an error object. And so in this case here, the error object is phone with a description JSON. So it's a little bit confusing about the type of object that you're returning here, but it could be any. So the bottom line is you can be creative with this. Okay, now in our function, in our code, in our component template, we have to be well aware of what we're replying with here, because we're going to interrogate it and display it. But try to understand the return value and what it means for it to be not valid. And I think it's a little bit confusing. Okay, so if it's valid, it returns null. If it's not valid, it returns this. So now we go back to the template. We take a look and see what's happening here. So here you have the form control name pointing to my-phone, and then you have this hidden span tag, and then you basically say, if this is hidden, if it's true, it'll be hidden. If not, it will not be hidden. So if it's not true, then you really have an error. Okay, or let me put it the other way. If you have an error, which is true, then this is negated, which is false. So it's not hidden. Okay, so the bottom line is, if it's not hidden, we show the error. We do a form get error on the phone validator with the my phone attribute, or let's say the my phone control name, and to show the description. Okay, so let's okay, so we go to our server. Let's see where our server is pointing. I'm gonna have to kill this to see where I am. I'm still in the pipe directory, so let me go to the reactive form reactive forms validator. What is it called? It's called Forms Reactive Validator. Forms Reactive Validator. Let's do an MP start. We're going to go into let's kill some of this stuff here. Okay, so we have to wait for this server to start up. And then we're going to, I'm actually still looking at it over here, so let me just leave that up. Let me go back to the code. Okay, so some points to remember. Remember, the index is pointing to the root component. The app module boots the app component. The app component, the root component, must have a form with form controls. you could actually, you don't really need the form. You could actually do this with just a form control. And then the template is going to use a directive to map, to point to where its form group is. Its form group is this form, which is this guy. And this guy is instantiated with this form group. So then the form control name points to the attribute in the backing object. So it's pointing to this. Okay, so our application is up and running. And this is the rendering of our application. Let me just make this a little bit bigger just for the heck of it. And now we're gonna, now we're gonna type in a phone number. And then we notice as soon as we type in another character, the phone is invalid. We remove it, it's valid. And notice it's not a good validation because I already have too many digits here. But that's the stupid validator that we implemented to make it simple. It seems like the validator allowed me to do any type of string and also include hyphens. And the thing it didn't like, the validator didn't like, was a character. Okay, so that's really all we wanted to show with this particular example. Thank you for joining.